Township Planning Board meeting of May 2018. At this time, I'd like to invite you to join us in the silent moment of prayer, followed immediately by the oath of allegiance to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I'm required to state that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided, indicating the time and place of the meeting in accordance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, by advertising the notice in the Star Gazette and the Express Times, and by posting a copy on the bulletin board in the municipal building. Beth, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes, members Correa.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Orchesky. Fryer.
Here.
Schneider. Weeks.
Here.
Mayor Mengucci.
Here.
Vice Chairman Fishback. Chairman Van Vliet.
Here.
Alternate Steinhardt. Here.
We have a quorum? Okay. At this time,
I think at this time you also have the availability for alternates to fill in for any type of hearing that you're going to have.
yes. So we have two regular members are not here. Both alternate number 1 and alternate number 2 will participate in the voting and the hearing of the applicant.
For the purposes of identification, Mr. Chair, ordinance number 1 is...
It's Tia Steinhardt.
Tia Steinhardt, and number 2, Earl Clemmer.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Is this a continuation of the hearing from last month? Or is it starting over from scratch?
This is, we didn't have a hearing last month on K&S other than to deem them complete in their application.
Okay.
Just deeming them complete. They didn't come in and they asked to be carried over to this meeting from actually the February meeting, I guess it was. And we continued it without them having to read the notice for their application. So.
All right, so I guess my question directly is everybody here tonight participating in this hearing had to have been at the February hearing as well?
No.
No, it does not. It's a restart. Okay. Great.
This is
starting from scratch. This is the actual hearing starting here.
Good. Just
up to
making
this
sure.
point, we've just been postponing and jumping around. So.
Sounds good.
Okay. That business being taken care of, or we'll proceed to old business. First order of business is the minutes of the April 25th, 2018 meeting. Has everyone received a copy of those? Are there any questions on it?
Just the one. Was it April 25th or April 24th? I don't remember.
Kel?
It was the 25th.
Go ahead, the date one. 25th, sorry.
I would just suggest that we change the date.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So it was April 25th.
Huh? I do have it in the, yeah, but I don't have it labeled right on the minutes.
Any other comments on it? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Any
I have to abstain on that.
abstains?
I abstain.
Okay. Okay. Minutes are approved as published then. We now move on to K&S Enterprises LLC concerning Block 100, Lot 2. This will be a...
The board will note that Ms. Schneider arrived at 7 o'clock.
Okay.
So she's regular.
She's a regular member. I don't know if that affects the...
So yeah, alternate number 2 will be stepping out.
Okay. This will affect the 2 alternates that have started? Or
I
do we
think
still
it adds
have...
up to 9.
Oh, it does with
Everybody
no,
here.
no, no, no.
Yeah, so they can be included.
All right, yeah, we have 2 regular members that aren't here. Mr. Orszewski, Mr. Fishback.
That makes sense.
Okay. Is the applicant here? I'm not asking you.
The applicant is here. I'm the attorney. I represent K&S Enterprises LLC. Sole owner of the company is behind me, Kenneth Schaefer. And what they've asked me to do is to get right into it. So I'd like to, at this point, have our engineer sworn in, qualified, and move forward with the testimony. And he's going to give an overview at the beginning.
Counsel, what's your last name?
Santini, S-A-N-T-I-N-I. First name is Dominic.
Got that.
Okay, Mr. Stiers, I don't know if he's been qualified before.
We'll swear him in.
Okay.
Do you swear affirm that the testimony you're about to give is words of truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, it is.
Please state your full name for the record.
Craig Stiers, S-T-I-R-T-S.
State your qualifications, please.
Mr. Stiers, would you state your professional qualifications?
I'm a professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts. I've been practicing for the last 25 years, primarily in our office is in Somerville, so primarily in the New Jersey location. I have done the 4 previous applications for this site. So they did, originally there was a maintenance garage, and then an addition, a minor subdivision, and now phase 1 of this, and now phase 2. So actually 5, so.
Okay, and have you qualified for any other boards, before any other boards as an engineer?
Yes, like I said, primarily through central New Jersey, from here all the way down to the shore, so similar projects.
I'd ask that he be qualified.
I think he's was qualified. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, why don't you give the board an overview of this project?
Okay. I do have a number of colored renderings. I can mark them as exhibits. The first colored rendering is back in, well, back up a little bit further. The K&S bought the property in 1997 and came in as as outlined in the application, they are a trucking operation that delivers materials to, for example, a construction site in Manhattan. So they would have materials in Manhattan that they don't have a place for until the point that they need the infrastructure delivered so they can build it. So this is basically trucking the materials, but also staging the materials until they need it at the time.
What materials are we talking about, Mr. Stiers?
It could be a variety of things.
Any building material?
Right. I mean, it could be forms, it could be transformers, it could be tanks. It all depends on the ultimate customer, I guess you could say. So, and you've been by there, especially over time, over the years. If you go down Strikers Road, they're just south of Route 57 on the west side of Strikers Road. When they first bought the facility, there was it used to be an old lumber yard, Wicks Lumber, and the rear of the building is a larger warehouse, 21,000 square feet. The front half was office space, and if you can recall, that basically concrete pads with open roofs there. So when they came in, you saw everything they did. I mean, they brought materials in, you drove by, you saw it. The first project that they did was to construct a maintenance garage for their, to do repairs on their trucks. That was approved in 1999, and like I said, built shortly thereafter. After that point, they moved on to, they did also purchase additional lands. The original property was just in this location here, and then they bought the property basically surrounding it, which allowed them to build the garage.
It's part of the Curtis Christmas tree area.
Well, that was actually before that.
Yeah, that was
So-
before that, you're right. Forgot about that line. Yeah, that's true.
After a number of years,
Okay, we marked the one, A1, right?
A1, correct.
Okay, now we're going to A2.
In 2009, they brought an application in for a new building, 35,000 square feet, what we're calling now Phase 1. That was approved in 2009. This is a colored rendering of that approval. So you have Strikers Road on the left-hand side, here on the right-hand side. You can see the new garage that they constructed, the existing warehouse, the office space, the parking, and now where those two concrete roofed areas were, we are now doing a 35,000 square foot building. When you go by there now, you can see that it's virtually a finished product. Shortly thereafter, in 2011, that's where they bought, again, additional lands from the Christmas tree farm. So that, the line used to be here, and if you think about it or know, there's power lines that run in this direction, northwest, southeast. They bought up to the easement line. So they added additional properties to to their property. So it's now almost 22 acres worth of property. So that's kind of the lead in up to this point. Obviously, as they came in, first they wanted to get their foot in the door. They got a nice piece of property in Lopatcong. They then added their garage. Their business grew and grew and grew. And again, like I said, when you first went by here, everything was outside. It was going back, it's a trucking facility. When materials, they store the materials. They wanted to try and get some of these materials inside to protect their clients' inventory. Hence the reason for the first building. And then going into the current application, which I can switch to now. And this would be A3. Is to have additional storage. So instead of having to orient yourself now, Strikers Road is now along the top here. Phase 1 is the slightly lighter brown, and then Phase 2, which is the application before you, is the darker brown, which is a 66,000 square foot building and a 5,000 square foot office in the front of it. So what this building would do would replace and enhance the existing building and then the office space. What this allows them to do again is that keep more of their product or their client's product inside, protected from the weather, but also allow them to bring their trucks into the building to load and unload. So not only are they protecting the materials, but kind of protecting their employees from the elements now too. So now the trucks would come in, be able to come inside the building, load and unload. So, a lot of times what they do now is they load the truck, they get in a snowstorm, and all of a sudden you have to get all the snow off before they even leave the facility. With this, they don't have to worry about that. The trucks are ready to go the following morning, and out they go.
Mr. Stiers, I have a quick question just for clarification. You said they bought the property right up to the power easement?
Yes.
I don't know, the drawings I have show about a 50-foot gap. Do I have dated drawings? Or?
This line right here now, this is the new property line.
Yeah.
This is the easterly edge of the power lines. So it's the easement, they kind of coincide, I believe.
Yeah, that's not what, there's a lot of drawings floating around here, a couple sets. Do I have
Okay.
dated drawings? Is that?
You should have the most current ones.
I know, it just shows a 50-foot gap here.
Oh, maybe it is, I'm sorry, I thought it went up to the easement, but maybe it didn't. Maybe it's just away from it. But it basically parallels the power line easement.
Okay, if that's the case, that's all right.
That's my...
As long as I understand.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. On the slide before that, maybe it was maybe go back to the original. Yeah. That old railroad track, that's been demolished?
Yes, that's been removed to
Okay.
the property line, yes.
Okay.
The easement stays because they don't want to give up a potential option of maybe putting the rail back at some point.
Okay.
So the easement that's here is still in place, it's just that physical rail has been taken out.
Okay, thank you.
So the additional improvements that they're looking to install is, again, going back, if you look at it, you see the trucks all over the place. What they're going to do is put a truck parking lot in the rear of the facility, 43 spaces for the trailers and the trucks. An employee parking lot in the rear, more for the truckers than anything else. And then obviously, if they have any, employee parking, that would be in the front. Lastly, would be a stone or gravel area for the larger materials. So this would be outside storage for the larger materials that they have. If it they can't store it inside, they have the ability to store the materials outside. And then obviously, lastly, would be a detention basin in the southwesterly corner of the facility. I think that kind of encompasses. The other thing is that with the original approval of phase 1, we did not have any loading dock capabilities. So we did allocate some loading docks on the back of the phase 1, and as well as a few on the southerly side of phase 2. So that's kind of the overview of the project itself, and really the crux behind why we're here before you. So.
You want to go into the comments? We got the comments from Major Consulting, correct?
Yes.
Why don't we go through those comments?
Sure.
We start, the comments actually start on page 5 of 12.
You're referring to the May 18, 2018 submission
correct.
from them? Thank you.
The issue, I guess that what we discussed earlier, is you have no issues with it, you agree with the engineer's comments, we can move beyond.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, we have no issues with any of the comments. We've been working with Mazur's office from the beginning. We've kind of gone through really 2 iterations with them, and there's some additional comments and really just nuances with landscaping and things like that. But there are some elements that they asked for some testimony on that we can run through just to kind of put it on the record. And I think one of them starts with comment 2.02.
2.02, yes.
Which talks about the kind of the operations of the business. As far as the hours of operation, it is 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. The anticipated number of employees, again, although this seems like a vast expansion of the facility, it really isn't. It's the crux of the application is to get materials from outside to inside.
It's open 6 days a week?
Yes, sir.
6.
So the number of employees is currently 57 and probably will not change. Like I said, it's to get things more protected. And I think even driving by on Strikers Road, I think you're going to see a significant improvement because you're going to see a nice new building now as opposed to the materials, distributed outside. The number of trucks entering and exiting, we took it at more of an average per week, so it would be 45 to 50 trucks per week, which is, again, not going to change. So it's going to be consistent from what you see now is what you're going to see in the future. Types of vehicles anticipated on the site, obviously it would be trailers coming in and out, and then employee vehicles. Obviously you would have the usual UPS trucks for the other type of deliveries.
Are you expecting more vehicles to be worked on, since you're expecting more vehicles, bigger things going on?
I don't believe so, no. Like I said, it's the operations themselves are going to stay the same. It's just the ability to put things inside. As far as the storage, I did mention before that the stone area is anticipated for outside storage. We can go on and talk about that because there's a couple more comments. Mr. Ritter has a comment about that, so we can address it at that point. As far as the location where the vehicles are being maintained, that's the reason they put the maintenance garage up. Any of the maintenance repairs of the vehicles are inside that building.
That's not going to change, that's existing.
Correct. Yep. Going back, again, the purpose of the gravel area is for outside storage. So if we move on. The rest of the comments in 2, the rest of the comments in 3, we'll again work with Mazur's office.
Mr. Stiers?
Yes.
Just to address comment 3.01,
Okay.
there are some items that you might want to request design waivers from. So one of them was the driveway
Oh, yes.
on the north side of the Phase 1 building that's being reconstructed.
Right.
That's currently being constructed in excess of the standard for driveways and accesses.
Right.
6%, so it's proposed at 8% right now?
Right. There's a proposed driveway that is coming into Phase 1. It is graded to 8%. You're right, we would like a waiver of that. It's really not going to be a full access driveway. It's more just the ability to, if needed, to get in and out of the building. It is 8%, but I don't see that as any type of detriment.
And it's not going to be, my concern, I guess, was loading docks. If it was going to serve as a loading dock, you probably don't want a truck backed up on an 8% slope.
Right,
But if it's
right.
not going to serve as a loading dock,
No.
then there wouldn't be an issue with, potentially granting a waiver.
Correct.
Or-
Yeah, all the loading would be on the back, the westerly side of Phase 1, and like I said, 4 spaces over behind Phase 2. So yes, we would ask for a waiver of that item.
Anything further in 3?
Just checking over them. A clarification, 3.06B talks about the roof leader. You're looking just to extend that to the basin, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Our concern is just to maintain,
Yep.
the discharge at the base of the basin rather than having any kind of potential future issues with
Yep.
erosion.
Okay, yeah, that's not a problem.
Okay.
And the bio retention basin, outlet control, anything there?
No, that's just a correlation between the plans. That's not a big deal.
And then the next one is 3.07. I understand you have some comments on that.
Yeah. Obviously, this is a significant project for the applicant. We did do basically a man-made liner in the smaller basin back in '99. That small basin cost them about $70,000. So you can see that this basin is close to 10 times that. And what we're looking to do is trying to use soil to line the basin rather than a man-made liner. I know it's the position of Mr. Sturbins that they would want a man-made liner. I talked to our geotech who did the work, and they believe that, and they've done probably dozens of projects, not only in this area, more specifically the Lopatcong school, and then also projects out in Pennsylvania where they've done soil as for the liner. So we're just trying to save some costs on the project. So that's one of the things we did want to discuss, if it's...
Do you see any drawback by using the existing soils on site?
Well, even if the soils on site aren't acceptable, importing soil material would still be cheaper than putting in a man-made liner.
So you'd be willing, if the soils there do not fit the requirements, you'd be willing to bring in the soils that would?
Yes. So, that's something, like I said, that's what we would prefer to do, just to try and save some costs on the project.
And the township's position, Mr. Sturbins, obviously, his experience in the municipality, there have been multiple basins in the township that have failed with soil liners because there's a lot of variability with how the soils are placed and compacted, and over time, sometimes those layers can fail, and then you end up with sinkholes in your basin, which ends up being more expensive than lining the basin up front. So, in the last years, however long, Mr. Sturbins has been in the township, he's required that those be lined with a geomembrane or plastic type liner. So we would still maintain that position that, we wouldn't recommend importing. And in the end, if the on-site soils would have to be tested and monitored in placement, and there's a lot of variability with the on-site soils because you never really know what you're digging up out of the ground. So if you end up importing soil, you might end up spending more in monitoring, compaction, placement, testing, importing the material than you would just putting a liner down and not having to worry about all that control in the work. So that might still be something that has to be discussed, maybe, has to be left open right now. But I would say that, our position is still that it should be mined.
Okay.
I think we're looking at a position in our township right now with the amount of sinkholes that we've been experiencing in the area, and since we are, the entire township's designated basically a clutched area,
Oh,
we've,
yeah, I mean,
we
we're,
prefer to have the liner than come in with a clay style.
right. I mean, it's, the issue is not challenge, it's just the type of how it's going to be addressed. And like I said, it is, we just did a project in town of Clinton where there was actual sinkholes on the property. And the method that we used was with soil. So that's, I mean, again, it's just trying to save some costs. And, if that's your stance, we made our argument. And
Say, I can appreciate, you're trying to do it with the most
Right.
cost-effective method, but we're looking at it since we are basically in the Highlands area. I don't know if Clinton, the area you're working in, is in any part of the Highlands area, but,
yeah, it is, but
we're looking at best method practices, especially for the zone that you're in. And I think we would almost insist on having the liner coming in from the township's standpoint.
okay.
Okay, I guess we've been heard on that issue. Next issue.
3.0 and 308 and 309. As far as 308, yes, we did use the standards for dam safety. And we can make sure that and review it again, but at this point we did use those standards. As far as 3.09, the requirement is to have a jute mesh protection for the swales in excess of 3%. And what we're showing is the use of sod. So we technically, I guess, need a waiver from that requirement.
Right. And we'd be supportive of that.
Okay.
And then we move on to the lighting and
Just before you move on to the lighting, I'm really not familiar with that reg they quoted on the dam. Is there any kind of periodic inspection associated with that?
This would be a class 4 dam. No formal inspections, but it should be, monitored periodically.
But you don't have to prepare a periodic report?
No.
Okay.
It's almost a permit by rule type thing. Going into landscaping, 4.01, we did show a landscape buffer, but it is a little bit, engineering plans, it is a little too formal, and I think both Mr. Ritter and Paul's office just wanted a little more natural, so we're going to modify that, and we'll work with them to get that satisfied as well. 4.02 talks about the street trees along Strikers Road. And due to the driveways, and actually in the past 2 applications, we've received a waiver for the additional plantings, and it's just more so with the site distance than anything else. So we would ask for that waiver again in this application.
And the reason for that waiver is because of the cars and tractor trailers coming out of the...
Yeah, just to allow for proper site distance coming from the site, yes.
With the trees, we're afraid of if we put more trees in there, other than the 6 that are already there, that it's going to create more of an obstacle for the vehicles coming out onto the road,
I would defer to Mr. Ritter on that if he has no objections to that.
Obviously, we have to maintain safe site distance, so
Yes.
I have no trouble with that. I do have some comments about further into the site.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
4.03 talks about the 25-foot buffer, which will work with both their offices. 4.04, they mentioned that they would like more landscaping on the north and west side, which would be the north side on this, and then the west. I would say if we can get away with not doing that, because as far as the traveling public, you won't see this side, and you definitely won't see this side. We do have trees shown along the edge of the driveway, but I think you're looking for more than just the trees there.
Yeah, it was just a recommendation for additional foundation plantings, but,
Right.
you know, it's at the board's pleasure, how they feel. There's no ordinance requirement per se.
George, you,
Well, I didn't comment on it there.
Oh, okay.
That was satisfactory.
okay.
Okay, anything further about the design, landscape design?
No, again, like I said, we'll work with them to get to their satisfaction besides that. 4.05 talks about the ordinance requires 1-foot candle, and we're up at 1.5. Again, with storage of some of the materials, we just like to, have a little bit higher lighting intensity, just for safety first, right? The traffic, it looks like that's more of a comment than a review. And it's basically just a statement, if this were ever a warehouse as opposed to a trucking facility, it shows the impact of what it could be as far as traffic, which is minimal.
And you basically have the same amount of traffic going there now. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly, yep. The geotech, we will again work with Mazur's office on this. Again, if you've been out there, a couple of the spots were due to the existing building and not being able to get some of the tests for the building. And it's same with the parking areas. There's a lot of castings out there. So we can come up with a plan and get it to their office and then do any additional testing if necessary. So that would be all of 6 through 601 to 603. As far as the fire official, we tried to reach out to them. I tried to email the fire official and then the fire chief, but we just haven't connected at this point. If the application is approved, we'll be glad to sit down with them and do any necessary markings.
Yes, I'd like to, make you aware of the fact that in our township, we don't use a standard thread. I don't know if you're proposing any kind of a sprinkling system in the buildings or have standpipes that are there that are going to be connected to them, but I'd like you to coordinate with the fire department to indicate, I know they have adapters that they use, but whether they want standard threading on the hydrants or they want the low-pack threading. So there's been some confusion in the town, like, in the past.
Yeah, everybody's got a different standard. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's not a problem. I mean, that's the miscellaneous details are, they are what they are. One of the things we did want to bring up is if we could, they recommended that they use the HMA paving. Again, that's kind of gets a little more costly. We would like to keep the standard or the specification that we have proposed. I mean, it's even been my experience that the DOT's even getting away from the HMA paving. They proposed it a number of years ago and now they put it down and, again, they're going back to the old stuff because it just, it's not living up to their standards, I guess. So, and again, it's more of a costly paving specification. And like I said, we would prefer to leave what we have proposed. Again, we're trying to save a little bit of money for the project.
Again, for Paul's office. Adam?
Yeah, I mean, generally, I don't know, on the I-5s and I-2s, the Marshall mix designs, are those still available readily?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was my concern, that they're not, they're not going to be readily available. And
yeah.
If you have to start trucking them in from a plant that's far away, or poor pavement being placed on a high traffic site, and then,
right.
you know, and my concern is just that you get good paving on the site, and you know, you're gonna be running heavy trucks out there, so have good paving down.
Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah, so we can definitely coordinate on that.
Okay. The rest of the details are fine. As far as the outside approvals, we have Warren County Soil Conservation District approval. We have, I guess, you know, usually with the county, it's a little bit of a back and forth. Once you get your approval here, you finalize with them. So we essentially have conditional approval from the county now. The health department has approved the septic system, which is right in front of the new office building. So that will be, it's able to be installed at any point, but just because of the coordination of running the facility, that'll be done in part of phase 2. And then obviously we worked out a conditional approval with the Highlands Council. D, again, we'll work with the fire department, sit down with them and get anything else, but all the other things are, like I said, we'll work with the offices and get that coordinated.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, were there any major items from the Highlands review? I guess I haven't seen this.
Landscaping.
Just landscaping, no major stormwater issues that they came up with? Okay.
Nope.
Usually they ask for like pocket rain gardens, all of this.
No, it was actually, they liked what we did. You know, it was more, they gave us they were, you know, as everybody probably knows, with the disturbance in the back, they were kind of taken aback by that. But once we got the soil erosion approval, that seemed to get everything moving along again. But it was, you know, like they gave me a copy of their landscaping standards, right?
Yeah, because they want native species. Right. And stuff. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So that was Mazur's review. I guess we can go to George's review letter after that. Starts on page 3, review comments at the bottom. One we will comply with. Yeah, and one of the things was, what Paul did was he issued a review at the end of last month, and in order to try and get as many comments as possible before you, we made another set of revisions to the best we could. So we didn't quite accomplish all of them, so you know, like George's kind of slipped through the cracks, but we will comply with his comments as well as we go through it. I think really unless I missed something, the one thing that really to discuss is the outside storage. I think everything else is really standard, and we have no problem, again, working with him to satisfy. But with the outside storage, what he has mentioned, the standard is 40 feet from the property line and 14 foot high. And you also have the railroad back here, which is right next to it. And what he suggested was if we go to 25 feet to pull it back to 51.
Yeah, that's what it would have to be to comply with the ordinance.
Right, and I think to try and maximize their storage space, and again with the keeping in mind the railroad right next to it, if we can keep it at 40 feet and be able to go to 25 and ask for a waiver of the height of it.
Well, the only thing, there's two things that we have to talk about then this evening. One, it's a variance.
Okay.
Did you notice for variances? That's the first question.
Any needed variances, yes, the normal wording.
That was in?
But that wasn't, yes, that's not
Okay.
specifically, no.
Well, then the board can consider it. I understand what the applicant is saying. The way the ordinance is structured, it's a minimum of 40 feet plus 1 foot of setback for every foot of height up to 25 feet. So in other words, if you wanted to do the maximum as indicated, you'd have to go to a setback of 51 feet. And clearly, I also agree with the applicant that obviously the railroad right-of-way right now is heavily wooded. There's heavy screens in place along there, but it's really a call for the board on that. But I think it would be considered a variance if we actually did it.
And additionally, you have a parcel right here that's also wooded, So you have that additional screening from.
Right, well, and you've also added some landscaping up
Right.
there, and I had some comments to put a few more shrubs and stuff in that area, but yes, it is in a well-screened portion of the site, if that weighs into the board's decision on the matter. But clearly, I think it would be appropriate to get it back the minimum of 40 feet as required by the ordinance.
Yeah, I think we have shown it's probably, along this side is probably in 35, and I think it should have been 40, I think some.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah,
okay. I think you're right. I think it is roughly 35 feet
Right.
the way it is now.
And the rear here is actually 80 feet, so it's really just, what we're discussing now is just the side that abuts the railroad.
So if it brings it back to 40 feet, they won't even need the variance.
Well, yes, if he wants to go to 25 feet, he would
Right.
need the variance.
And the only reason we're asking for the 25 is because now and then you have a larger piece. I mean, for the most part, I talked to them before we came over, and they could live with the 14, but now and then you would get that 25-foot piece or something in there about. And then, you know, is it an enforcement issue? Do you need it? I mean, all this stuff is temporary storage. So it's just a kind of just-in-case scenario. I mean, for the most part, you probably have stuff that would be 15 feet or less.
I will agree with the applicant that that area is heavily screened with the growth that's in the railroad right-of-way itself. And if I recall correctly, you are also proposing additional plantings along that edge, even as we...
Yeah.
Yes, you're proposing to put some planting in there now, in addition to the buffer that exists, so it's probably one of the most heavily screened areas on the property right now, that corner.
What kind of materials are we talking about? Is this a bulk storage area for bulk material, or just individual pieces of whatever the material is coming in?
Yeah, and it depends on the ultimate, I mean, like I said, they would try and keep most of the materials inside, but anything that's larger, you know, say it's a transformer. Yeah, I mean, you've seen those things, they may not be able to put them inside, so they would have to store them out in the yard.
And
So it may be,
how long would they be on site? Well, I know it's a tough question.
right.
When it's needed. So that's
Right.
difficult.
And again, if it's shipped early, it could be there a few months. If it's temporary and it's a landing, it may stay on the trailer and then just get shipped right after that, so.
I'm just a little bit confused here. The storage area is down in the lower left there?
Yeah, the light gray area.
Right,
Yes.
and what are you asking for along the railroad?
So the required setback is 40 feet, which we will agree to.
40 feet from the property line?
Yep, so it'll be, this is approximately the location.
Right.
But if we had materials that were up to 25 feet, we would need to pull it back to 51 feet. So we would lose storage space, but we would be allowed to go higher.
Yeah.
So what we're just trying to do is maximize the ground space.
And the southern part there,
Down
that's
here.
already 51 feet.
Down here is 80.
80? Now, see, I'm showing 51 on here. No, what is that? That's small.
That should hit the setback line. 81.
81,
Right.
yes, all right.
Excuse me.
So you should have 51 and you're asking for 25 along the railroad?
No. We're asking, we will agree, well, the requirement is 40.
But if you go over 25, if you get 25, height-wise,
You need to pull in.
you have to pull it back to 51.
Right.
Right, and I'm assuming you want that flexibility, right?
Right, just in case.
All
I mean,
right, so we're
like-
talking 51 versus
It's 40.
25.
No, 51 versus 40. Right.
With the railroad there, bumping up to the highway there, really not.
And as you come down, we just can't, as you come down 57, it just keeps getting higher.
Higher and higher.
So, I mean, down here, you're probably 25 feet high from the road.
So one more time, our ordinance requirement is 40?
40 feet.
40
40 for under 25.
Yeah, 40.
So you're agreeing to 40?
Well, we're not necessarily agreeing.
Well,
We're-
I mean, you like,
The variance would be to go up to 25 feet.
and not go
And
the
not pull it
additional,
back, right.
yeah. All right.
What's the distance from your property line to Route 57?
About 180 feet roughly to the, I believe, yeah, this is the right of way, so 200 feet or so.
And the railroad's not going anywhere.
Right, exactly.
And the trees in there have been there for 100 years.
Yeah, you have a buffer actually on both sides.
That's the problem.
Yeah, council, can I just see your notice real fast?
Where the office building is, what is the circled area to the little bit up to the right? Yeah, right there.
Waivers of variance.
That's it.
Yeah, there's little pockets of it.
Okay,
Beautiful.
awesome. Yep.
Okay, Chairman, just taking a look at the notice, it does indicate that the applicant in association with the site plan is also seeking any type of waivers or variances from the requirements of the zoning ordinances that may be found to be necessary during the hearing. While it's not with specificity, it does indicate that a variance may be required. This is kind of a minor variance. It's a technical variance, very technical. I think that this notice would probably be sufficient to put any type of property owner in the vicinity or the public on notice that a variance may be required and waivers may be required in the course of the proceedings. So I think,
So we can consider that
I believe
they've
that
been
the board does
notified.
have jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. I think I heard you, Jim. I'm still back to the question, is this a waiver or is this a variance? If it's a variance, shouldn't we be hearing some testimony on type of variance and the benefits, proofs?
Well, I believe it's a variance. I don't believe it's a waiver. The applicant's engineer did provide some logic for why he thinks this.
It said it was cheaper.
What?
It said it was cheaper or whatever. I don't know.
Okay. The answer is yes, to a certain extent, but I will say that the applicant has put forth a case of why this variance should not raise to have substantial detriment on the town's zoning.
Does this testimony satisfy the municipal land use law in your opinion?
I think it does.
Okay.
And I agree with the applicant that I don't think you can get a better buffer than the railroad track that's in there today with the wooded characteristic. And also, as I say, he didn't emphasize it enough, but they are proposing their own landscaping in that space as well. So, and in all honesty, given the thickness of the buffer, whether he set it back the 40 feet he agreed to or go 11 more feet, it is probably has no real impact on the buffering involved. the 11 more feet against that railroad track will make no significant. It isn't like they have a viable neighbor that this could specifically impact. So I'm very comfortable with it. I think he's met the burden if the board feels likewise on that.
Okay, thank you for the explanation, George.
Yeah.
No, is there anything else in that?
I don't think so. The last thing I just noticed, as far as the water is concerned, the garage is serviced by public water. The existing building in this area did have a well, but they are, as you can see, this blue line right here, they are bringing public water to the new building. So
It's already in.
right, it's actually part of phase one, so it is in now, so it will be serviced by public water.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, I missed the fact that they're bringing a hydrant on site. My comment that the back of the building wasn't within 500 feet of a hydrant. They have put a hydrant on the plan that should take care of the water problems to the rear of the building.
Yeah, what we had originally was bring in the phase one approval, it was to a hydrant in this corner, but to kind of incorporate into phase two and the loop road, we've moved both the FDC and the hydrant out closer to the loop road for better access for the fire department.
Do you have any problem with my comments about extending the curbing across the front where you have that 31 parking stalls or so? Your plans don't show the curbing to be continued.
You say to extend the curbing?
Yeah.
Yeah, the plans show it just to, basically, I guess there's a piece of curbing in today, and then there's, I don't know, 15, 20 car parking area there that you're not proposing to add new curbing on?
Yeah, what we had, this area right here was part of
Correct.
the garage, I believe. So that's the reason the curb stopped there.
Right.
And what they're looking to do is just have curbing along the front there.
Yeah.
And I think you also mentioned putting in a couple islands.
Well, it's 31 cars. I'd love to see one cut out for something, break it up a little bit with a tree planting area, because it is on the frontage with Stryker Road.
Yeah. Because I think the other thing is we kind of justified that I think we have more than enough parking based on the operations. So if we did lose a spot or two, we would be at 102 or 101, but we'd still be over what is required for a trucking facility. And I think I've testified that it's not warehouse, it's a trucking facility, so.
Okay, because that was one of my other questions in here, is whether or not the board feels comfortable with it continuing to classify this as a trucking facility versus warehouse. The applicant complies with the parking requirements under either of those today. It's not an issue. But in the resolution, how you refer to it will affect, if they come in the future for other things, what we call this. If we call it a warehouse, parking has to be 1.5 per employee. If we call it a trucking terminal, it has to be 1. So it's really just a question of what the board thinks this is and how it's changed over the years, whether they consider this to be a trucking terminal or a warehouse going forward.
And I think one of the things is, and I kind of talked to them before this, is that it's a type of facility what's called cross-docking, which is probably similar to, for you guys, it would be like a UPS, where they bring in, they cross-dock over to another truck. So this is the same type of thing, which is consistent with the definition of a trucking terminal, as opposed to warehousing.
Except that it may sit there until it's needed.
Yeah, but
it's not like it goes in,
yeah,
goes out.
Right, the timing of things,
Yeah.
it's just a matter, is it 1 day or 1 month or 6 months, but it all depends on the ultimate client, so. But I think that would still be storage as opposed to warehousing.
Is there anything else that would matter, whether we called it a trucking facility or a warehouse? It's only the parking that gets affected?
It'd only be the question of going forward. As I said, the applicant, regardless of how it's classified, they comply. And that's not an issue for this application. It's just a question that came up in reading the resolutions, whether or not the board still feels comfortable that this remains a trucking terminal, or by adding all this additional square footage, that it's now more or less become a warehouse going forward. And it's more a call than anything. Clearly, it doesn't affect what they have before you tonight. They comply. And I obviously don't have any problem with the parking ratios they're showing based on their testimony. It's just a fact thing, and to me, whether it goes in the resolution, it would just guide those who look at it later if there's more changes in it. There may not be, I don't know, but it would help to guide those who read the resolution in the future as to what this is. Because our code actually has parking standards for trucking and for warehousing. We make that distinction.
George, just a question. On your review, did you see any definitions for warehousing or trucking in the code that regard them? The only reason why I bring that up is that under the state law, there are statutes that govern warehousing, and there's a legal significance in the state law.
And a trucking terminal, too.
As to what a warehouse is and what constitutes a warehouse.
If they are, they're not in our code.
No, and that's why I was wondering if, because our code would supersede that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I did an application in Branchburg similar to what you're talking about, and unfortunately, I thought of it halfway here. Otherwise, I would have had the definition with me. But it was the exact same thing. Is it a trucking terminal or is it a warehouse? And we went through the same discussion. And, you know, in Branchburg, it would have been a variance if it was a trucking terminal and not a warehouse. So it's interesting you bring that up. But I think after talking to them, it's consistent with, like I said, the trucking terminal more than the warehouse.
You get with transloading with railroads as well.
I'm sorry.
Railroads do this as well with transloading and things. You can get into the differentiation. I don't have it in front of me. I just have a feeling that this doesn't technically meet what the state would consider to be a warehouse.
Right.
And in absence of a specific definition here, I think that we'd have to default to what the state looks at. And most likely, it will probably be, in my analysis, when I go back and look, the trucking terminal for purposes moving forward, just because I think that's what we would do.
And you would prefer it to be a trucking terminal?
Yes.
Well, that's always been his business. He's into trucking. And this is just something that people that don't have room to store their own stuff, like the city of New York, they ask him to bring it in until it's needed, then bring it to the city who bought it and owns it.
Is that what the purpose, and that's kind of where I was trying to go with the garage, all right, is that what that purpose is? And on the parking lot for all the trucks down below, I can't see how many are there, but compared to what you used to have, is that equal or more? So if it's more, my question would be, is it for growth, or is it to store more, or is it to be equal with what you had?
It's, I mean, again, if you go out there, they're parked all over the place down here, whereas this will be...
That's why I was asking, they're all over now.
Right, this will be a more organized,
So
I mean, that's the thing.
I figure it's about the same then?
Yeah. Like I said, they're really not looking...
Just cleaning it up.
Right. Yeah. That's exactly it.
Any further presentation?
That's it.
No?
That's all we have.
Board members, or is there anyone that has further questions or comments on it?
No, the only thing, I agree with having the tree, like a section between the parking spaces to have some kind of an island or something like that, as George specified. I kind of agree to go along with something like that. Just to break up that whole front section.
It's a good idea. I like that, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, can I just qualify? Other than what we discussed here, then, you have no trouble with the other comments I made? Fine, that's all I wanted to issue.
Adam, do you have any further comment on it, or?
I think we covered all the issues that we had highlighted.
You have no problem? All right, at this point, I'll open it to the audience, the public here, if they have any comments or questions of this applicant. It's expert engineer. If there's anything you have folks want to know, now's the time to ask it.
We work with Mr. Steyer, so we're
Okay. No further public participation. We'll.
I have one other quick question, sorry. So the only stone area will be there, everything else will be
Well, this is stone right now, so we
Okay.
intend to leave that really, so we're gonna kind of
Okay.
tie it in. I mean,
Okay,
if he ultimately paves it, it's not really a change in any of the stormwater or anything like that, but,
Okay.
you know, it kind of leaves him the option at this point.
okay. But everything in the front there, the
Yeah,
green, is
all the-
all,
yes.
it's all grass and, okay,
Yes.
okay, great. Thank you.
Question more for Adam. Adam, do you agree that there's not enough room to put trees between those 30 parking spots and Strikers Road from a site distance issue? Looking at it from a plan perspective, it looks like it's got to be 40 or 50 feet to the road. I would think that there's room for some plantings there that wouldn't interfere with the site distance.
I can tell you, being on them roads, that's a bad area.
Yeah.
All right, and he'll agree with that, I think.
The trees that are there are gonna get bigger than what they are.
My opinion,
It's bad.
leave it as is.
There's also a low area here that's kind of a swale that picks up the runoff from Strikers Road and then ultimately goes around, so you don't want to really mess with that either because it's picking up the runoff.
They're running to beat the wind.
Yeah.
So our professional agrees.
I mean, ultimately, it's a safety concern. I mean, obviously, of course, you can put as much material in along the right-of-way as possible and to maintain the minimum site triangles. But with the volume of trucks that are going through there and the volume of passenger vehicles that go through there, I've sat there plenty of times at the light through 4 cycles. So, I mean, I would want to see as much site distance as possible. I mean,
Yeah, and you got about 7 or 8 there now. It's just a little hard to see on the rendering. There's about 7 or 8 there now.
Yeah, Dan, just so you know, the applicant has proposed to put in plantings along the face of the parking area, like shrubbery that'll block the view of the bumpers and that kind of thing. And if he gives us 1 or 2 little cutouts along there and drops 1 or 2 trees in there, they'll be clear of the site distance, and I think that'll do it. I think that should be more than adequate.
Okay.
Yeah, because what he's saying is instead of the parking space, we'll have a couple grassed islands that we could put trees in there.
Right.
Which would add to the buffering along the frontage.
Okay.
That's it?
Done.
All done?
Well done, ready for motion.
Okay, any further comments from the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion to go for final preliminary and final site plan approval, I believe.
I'll second.
With a variance.
What about
With
the
the
variance?
Appropriate waivers that were requested. I can identify them if you want, but I do have them written down. Yeah.
I think it would be worthwhile.
Okay. There's a driveway waiver for a small portion on the western portion of the property for 8% where 6 is provided. Going through my notes.
And ordinance, the next
The
one.
buffer work will be done to the satisfaction of the board engineer and board attorney. Street trees, site distance, the same thing. We just talked about that. The foot candles, 1.5 foot candle for security reasons is a waiver. Paving material will be a waiver coordination with the board engineer. We have the 25 foot at the 40 foot mark for outdoor storage.
Yes.
one more,
Nope.
swale stabilization.
Swale stabilization waiver.
Sod's gonna be provided.
Sod, that's it.
Where mesh is required.
That's it. And so that's it. Those are the waivers and the variance.
I do have a question for Adam on the waivers, the light spillage. I mean, I have no problem with the intensity on the site, but I guess these will be shielded and direct and so on, so that you don't get...
It should be maintained to the property line, cut off to the property line.
Right.
We can verify that in the final plan submissions.
I think, if I remember correctly, the same lights that were up at Coordinate Health, close to it. And, you know, they actually keep it to that line. All right, it's permanent. They don't have shields. They just put the right size light there and the angle of the way it serves. And it was one of the things I looked at.
Yeah, the LEDs are pretty good.
Same thing.
They're very specific these days, so they're pretty good.
Yeah, they brought it right to their line and that was it.
And then also keep in mind that this parking lot is lower than the Strikers.
Joe, won't exceed the standard at the property line. All right.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion with those waivers and variances and
May have to
Approve it.
amend the original. Right. Are they amending the original motion to include all the waivers and so on?
no, I don't think we are. We haven't.
Donna seconded the motion.
Oh,
Well, I'm
okay.
saying does the original motion include all those waivers?
Okay, I didn't hear the second on the motion, I'm sorry.
I mean, it's Joe.
Are we,
So we're ready for a roll
Yeah, I
call?
just added that in, that was technically, it wasn't just preliminary and final site plan approval, it also included those waivers and that variance. So whoever was the original movement could say, I amended to include the...
That's what I'm
That's what you
suggesting.
want to say,
Yeah.
you want to amend it and then take another motion.
Yeah, you can amend your motion.
Okay, well, you made it,
Yeah.
I guess we'll amend it to include the waivers and any changes that were
And
discussed.
the,
So you're making that a motion now?
Right.
Yes.
Okay, do I hear a second on it?
So who made the motion?
Donna made the
Well, she
motion.
seconded
You made
it.
the motion.
No, he
No.
asked for a motion.
You
I
asked for the motion, I said, so nobody, all right, so I
Nobody
first,
made a
so that was me to make the first, sorry.
You're gonna make
Yeah.
the motion?
Yes, I'm gonna make the motion.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call.
Okay.
Vote, Beth?
Members Korea,
Yeah.
Johnson,
yes.
Pryor.
yes.
Weeks,
Yes.
Mayor Mengucci.
Yes.
Chairman Van Vliet.
Yes.
Member Steinhardt, yes. Member Klein.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Good luck.
Call your name?
That's, you didn't call my name.
Oh, you didn't like that.
Really, I hate-
Crosswalk.
7:05. Yes. Wait, I didn't say yes.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure working with you people. Glad to be in this community and expand and improve our business.
Glad to have you. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
I know, seriously.
Testimony.
Would anyone like to take a 5-minute recess? Sure. Let's keep going.
Got a 5-minute recess?
Yeah, we'll have 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Locke.
Donna, I gotta tell you, every time I hear about islands, you're absolutely like, they look great. I cringe. Somebody got plowed, I'm thinking, oh, I'm sitting up here going like, yeah, okay. Somebody's gonna plow around those things. We have more islands at high school in the Caribbean, for God's sake.
Because
Ay, ay, ay.
started times without their pre-con, satisfying all their conditions.
Oh, that was actually bought about 10, 15 years ago.
Phase two.
Victor bought it up.
Yeah, we talked about it.
Until,
You wanna make it a boulevard? Again,
they're satisfied.
who's gonna cut the grass on the island?
Pre-construction. They'll start bringing them.
Discuss the,
It's too wide now. When we repaint that area, just put a wide shoulder on both sides, just make it 2 lanes, it's not very, just, yeah.
It's too big, it's too, there's not the whole.
From 57 to Baltimore's okay. From,
Yeah, that part's okay.
even the part by Country Hills is narrow enough, but from there up, yeah, it is
Right, and then
dangerous.
sometimes there's almost 3 cars, because if they're trying to pass another car, it's crazy.
Sometimes you get somebody's going on a quarter rate.
I mean, part of that is nice, because at least when you put it in, at least you have room to get around. Some people just, they won't go there.
all right, the next order of business is the planning board's rules and regulations. We discussed the last time, and there were some comments that we had. I think they've been addressed. Mr. Johnson had a request to see about the rules and ethics law in New Jersey, or each one of you should have received a copy of that now this evening from Mr. Hearn. And any comments on it, or?
I had one question. Is this the same print that you showed me after the meeting? There was a version of the book that was not available to the average person, so you had to be a member of a society.
Yeah, let me just explain what the package is, because last meeting there was a question about, well, what is the local government ethics law? Where is it? How can I find it? How can I look at it? There's also a question raised last meeting about what other boards do and how many other boards have rules and regulations. I think the guys up here can tell you most boards do. Whether it be in an ordinance form or actually in rules and regulations that they adopt year to year as they go forward. So what I did is I went to the website at the DCA, Local Government Services website, and on the website, it's actually on the front of this package. You can actually see the website there. I just downloaded the local government ethics law from that website provided by the state, and I printed that out for your benefit so everybody knows what the local government ethics law says, does, and what the local government services does and finance board does in respect to it. With that, and what I didn't print out, but I did print a small portion of, is that they do have public advisory opinions. There's the website for that as well, and there's actually an index here of various local opinions that they have come through from 1991 through present day. These are just the public advisory ones, not personal private ones. These are just what they published. If you want further reading, you can go to that website and actually see what the local finance board did as to these specific cases. So that's the second document in there. Now, getting into the latter part of the document, the first, or the documents I should say, the first section is actually the model rules taken from Cox, which is the land use book. They're just 4 model rules. Okay. Subsequent to that, and after that, I just literally through Googling various towns, and I think it was planning board rules and regulations, I came up with these and appended them to there. I think there's an additional 4 of them, and you can see that they're in various formats. Some of them follow the model rules, some don't. Every municipality planning board is different. How people want to, they're your rules, how you adopt them, what you want to do with them, your call. So I provided you now multiple, I guess, models and specimens to look at. The specimen that I produced for you just to look at and consider is really an amalgamation of the model rules taken from Cox, from other things that I've done in other towns, and just looking at them and putting them together in somewhat of an organized form. I guess it was earlier in the week, Mr. Johnson, you were good enough to actually get me some comments. You know, again, it's not my decision. It's everybody's on this board's decision.
Gary, you have those as well.
As to where
the comments that I sent in.
Yes.
Hopefully the attachment came through.
in your model.
On the second try, yes.
So, you know, it seems to be, and I'm just saying that most of it seems to be focusing on conflict of interest, difficult subject matter, difficult subject area. Generally, every model rule that I see does see a remedy in the board for addressing it, because somebody has to at some point, and it's not just the board attorney. That's not it. The board has to act. So that's the information I provided and the guidance that I can give you guys. It's really your choice how you move forward with your rules and regulations.
The original draft copy more or less encompasses a lot of this, or all of what's in here.
It does. It may not be verbatim to the model rules. There's, took some authorship and did my own thing with it, put a little bit of a unique touch as to it. But again, that's just my work. That was just my suggestion. It doesn't mean that it's the board's.
And the Cox that you're talking about, that's where you have to be a member in order to access it, so you were able to get a copy of that, correct?
You know what? It's funny. When I did it for the purposes of my set, I actually had to log in and get it. Surprisingly, when I was putting this package together today, I was going to do that, but when I Googled it, it came right up. So the public can actually go to it right now. If you Google Planning Board, New Jersey Planning Board Rules and Procedures, one of the links is to GAN law books for this, and you don't have to pay. So.
Jim, the last thing I have in mind is Hopewell. Where are the model rules? Are they in the order here?
Yeah, the first set of model rules comes out of Cox, and it's not in page number, but it would look like at the header it says Appendix 3. At the top of the page, it's down.
It's right after the public advisory. There's like 3 pages for the public advisory, and then it's the appendix 3.
If the public advisory opinions, there's something that's not labeled, is that what we're talking about? Appendix 3. Oh, model, I see them, okay.
So that's the beginning of the Cox model rules, as put together and provided in the book. Then I think we go into Highland Park. There's one that I pulled from a few different towns. I think one was from Bedminster, Bernardsville, Morristown, South Jersey, Hopewell, South Hunterdon. So those are just samples that I just chose from across the state. Just
no.
That is what, that's C-O-X, Cox?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now it's Cox.
I don't want to spell
Now
it.
it's Cox and Cody. Okay. And then unfortunately they're both passed away. But.
I don't want to Google the wrong Cox and who knows what's going to come up.
So I was just
Yeah,
trying
Drill and Lisa John went over to school.
that's why, because you can't find it, yeah. Like, are you too far?
Yeah, it's the guy's name, right?
It's right
Cox
down.
is the guy's name. I have seen that referenced in case law.
Yes. It is. It's the go-to resource for land.
Kind of the go-to resource.
Judges depend on it.
You'll see courts actually use it in their opinions.
It's actually his name.
It's
the New Jersey Zoning and Land Use Administration practice book.
Okay.
It's by William Cox, so when you talk about Cox, it's in reference to this book.
All right.
So how would the board like to proceed? Do you want to take another month or so to go through the reference material here, to kind of look at it, and we'll come back next month and we'll try to come up and go with a shortened, abbreviated, unless you want to adopt this. I mean, it's okay too.
No.
But I think,
I think it'd be good to go, take some time to go through it.
a lot of time, especially the case law. But I think if we would come back, if we're in a consensus, that we should probably look at and adopt a draft proposal that our attorney has given to us beforehand, unless there's any glaring areas that you think you want to go against, and at least get that in place for us to operate under. So, other boards, it seems there's a lot of boards in the state of New Jersey that have it, almost depend on it, and get us on the list.
I would just like to say that the matter that was a conflict last meeting was a section in the ethics law provided by Attorney Bryce about the board's ability to be able to vote to remove someone if they refuse to remove themselves when a conflict of interest is evident. And if you want to know where that is in this appendix, it is section 4:3-6 under remedy. And it explicitly states that the board has that right to do so, and largely it's to maintain the respect of the board. And the only difference is that in our drafted rules and regulations, it's not explicitly stated as a remedy, it's just incorporated into the whole of the conflict and ethics regulation.
So we'll give it another month.
Yeah.
We can digest looking through this. You don't have to memorize it, but, you know, at least be aware of it, and we'll, the next opportunity we have.
I just have a quick question since
Certainly.
I wasn't here last month. I wanted to ask, the rough draft that you had given us all, where was your starting point with that? Like, where did you know to look for certain areas, like, you know, how did you start? And how did you get all the sections that you did, and how you chose to word it and what you chose to do with it?
How did I start? I started with what I did generally in Little Falls as a basis, and then I looked at model rules.
Okay.
And those are just models, so I literally just kind of wrote.
Okay. So, did you touch on all of the ones that you did in Little Falls in hours, or did you just took them?
No, because that was an ordinance. That was a different, that, in Lopatcong, you have an ordinance that touches on various things that the model rules would suggest, but you don't need to because it's in an ordinance. So it was kind of taking from here to here, cutting, pasting, moving this.
Okay. So the sections that we already have ordinances on, you just didn't do those, but you did all the other ones?
I tried to, but I can't say that I did it perfectly.
Okay.
It's just a starting point.
Okay. And pretty much what you gave to us is what you did in Little Falls and that they've adopted?
It's different from what I did in Little Falls, because they didn't, Little Falls did not have they had a zoning ordinance. They didn't have a subdivision site plan and land use procedures ordinance. So I just wrapped it all up into one. So if you look at that ordinance, which they did adopt, it gets into things about subdivision site plans and things of that nature. But it has various provisions in it that deal with planning board stuff.
Right. Okay. I guess obviously I'm getting to the points that were hot topics last month, which were the conflicts and the secretary situation and those sorts of things. Were those things that were adopted in any of your others, or where did you get the wording for those?
I think the wording in here, I actually cobbled it together from the model ordinances and drafted it. That's what I did.
The model ordinances from
Cox.
Or from Cox? Okay.
From what I provided.
If you look at the Cox, like the section I said before, four section, like the whole entire section is just condensed into one in our. Yes, it's all condensed into one lump. Yeah.
So, and just by way of, organization of board attorney, those are all pretty much standard. One of the issues that you brought up was educational requirements, so I put that in there. Financial disclosure, you brought that up. I put that in there because you asked me to. Ethics, conflict of interest, and disqualification. From the first meeting I was here, that was talked about, and I addressed it. I addressed it and tailored it to the best that I could, that I thought it would be amenable to everybody on this board, so that it would not end up having huge fights where there is some authority here to resolve the issues.
That's where that came from. If that's what you're asking me, I actually drafted that specification myself out of models, okay? Attendance, there was something that was brought up about attendance. It was just basically, I cut and pasted that. Alternates, all cut and pasted. Rights and privileges, cut and pasted. Participation in discussions, voting, that's cut and pasted because that goes to alternates and when they should be there. Rule of necessity, lax quorum, cut and pasted.
Okay.
All of these things were cut and pasted. Generally, you're going to see that order of business, and I kind of tweaked this a little bit because it says open to the public. You're going to see that I underline that. It's not a requirement under the Local Public Meetings Act that this board generally opens it to the public for general comments outside of a hearing. So I put that in there to say, maybe you guys don't want to do that, maybe you do.
Right.
There's an option there. Time limitations, I said 10 o'clock, I think.
Yeah.
There was a change, testimony beyond 10:30, that has to get changed.
Right.
Appearance by parties, testimony under oath, order of presentation, that I think I kind of actually did.
Okay.
Reports of board and professionals, just because through my experience with other boards, kind of typing it in there, because that's what attorneys do. Viewing by board's personal knowledge, that I think is cut and pasted. Testimony from board employee and other professional witness, cut and pasted. Evidence, effective judgments, cut and pasted. Voting procedure, cut and pasted.
Okay.
Most of it is cut and pasted. There are parts of it that I did tweak. So a lot of it was kind of in feedback from what I actually got from the board publicly in the first 2 meetings I was here, so.
Okay.
All right?
So I guess at the next meeting, Mr. Chairman, if anybody who has a comment, we can go over the comments. Am I the only one who's getting a comment at this point?
You are. You're the only one that I received an email from.
So at my next meeting, hopefully everybody can get their comments in, and we can go over them.
Yes.
Amendments to rules, I did that one personally, so.
Okay, anything further? Seeing nothing, hearing nothing, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Joe, I didn't mean to cut you short. I forgot to open it to the public. Any public comment?
Public has no comment.
Hearing no comment, we will now proceed to adjourn. Joe's made the motion. Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay.